It's taken me 26 years to fall in love with home. You know, it really has. How did I come up with the idea of always Pinkies Up? So 2 years ago, when I just bought my couch, I was sitting on my couch and my friends, they would come over and we would always have conversations on the couch. And I thought, oh my gosh, I want to have a platform where I interview people on my couch. And we talk about, you know, their experiences professionally. And then it got a little deeper. I wanted to inspire inner city kids and career enthusiasts, just because I feel like I was fortunate enough to have my mother behind me who drove me to succeed. But everybody doesn't have that privilege or access to that person to drive them. And I feel like a lot of kids in the inner city, they want to escape those boundaries, but they can't. So I wanted to be an outlet to these kids and, you know, and to these young adults and really expose them to professionals who have lived this life and were able to make it out on top. But so that idea was conceived 2 years ago, and then I went through a horrible depression and just let everything fall. But then once I got out of that depression at the end of 2016, and everybody kept telling me how awesome of an idea and how awesome of a platform it would be, the momentum picked up again. I'm like, okay, Sean, you have to do it, you have to do it, you have to do it. And in January of 2017, I decided to just do it. I decided to stop being so afraid and stop trying to make it so perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. But yeah, the idea is to sit with industry professionals and really allow them to tell their story, because I feel like a lot of these industries are so glamorized. You know, people have so many misconceptions about what it means to be a publicist, what it takes to be a stylist, what it takes to be an accountant, or how to even balance a checkbook, you know, how to raise your credit score, you know, things like that. So what I'm doing is exposing the world to these people who have been able to be successful in their career and in their own right, and allowing people to see, you know, their story. Growing up in Baltimore was interesting, but I don't think I realized it was interesting until I got older. I didn't really notice that I was a part of the middle class. I didn't grow up poor, but I knew I wasn't rich either. But my mother, she did a really good job at exposing my sister and myself to the world at a pretty young age. We always traveled. We were always shopping. People would always, in my house where I grew up, it was built. We had it built. So people would always walk past my house and look into the house and saw that we had water wall carpet and a chandelier, and everybody was like, oh my God, y'all are so rich. And I'm like, well, if we're so rich, why are we living on the same block? And my mother, she always had, you know, different cars. So I didn't really identify with a specific class system, but I knew that I was surrounded by, you know, poverty and drugs and, you know, kids who weren't so fortunate to go to great schools. You know, my mother, she did a really great job at putting my sister and myself in really great schools that challenge us academically. So it was rough. You know, I remember growing up seeing drug needles and, you know, bags which had like coke or, you know, weed and stuff in there when I was growing up. But, you know, I also went outside and played all the time with the kids on the block in the neighborhood. So I don't know, it was interesting. But now looking back in my adulthood, I see that Baltimore wasn't and isn't big enough for me. Growing up, and I didn't understand it then, and it still kind of freaks me out now. I was always told that I'm going to be famous. I never knew why people would tell me that, but I've always had this personality that brought people in. You know, I was like a magnet. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be famous one day. But it's interesting because I never wanted to work in entertainment. I actually wanted to be an OBGYN. And my dream was to go to Morehouse and do pre-med. And then I started to model in high school. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to study fashion. I don't know. Well, I didn't realize what was in me that made me understand that I didn't want to be in Baltimore, but until I got older. You know, growing up, I just thought, okay, I'm a kid, I have these dreams and these aspirations, and I want to explore the world and get out of Baltimore. But I don't think I did any soul searching to realize, you know, what that was. Losing my mom at 19 was very, and is still very surreal 7 years later. You know, when you think of parents, you think that they are invincible. They can withstand, you know, anything. And at 19, I guess I had to deal with the reality that, oh my goodness, parents aren't invincible. You know, at some point you have to navigate life without them. But unfortunately for me, I didn't expect to have to deal with that so soon. My freshman year of college, when I went home for Thanksgiving break, I knew that something was off. Like the air in the atmosphere in the house was just really stiff. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And I remember we were, my sister, myself, and my little brother, who was maybe about 5 at the time. We were eating breakfast, and my mother was just really quiet in the kitchen. And she was like, I want to tell you guys something. I'm like, what you gotta tell us? And she was like, you know, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And years later, maybe about 2 years ago, I actually found out that she started feeling symptoms back when I was in the 7th grade. But I didn't find out that she actually had breast cancer until my freshman year of college. So immediately my sister broke down crying. And my little brother, who was too young at the time, he didn't really understand, but he was crying because my sister was crying, my mother was crying. So I couldn't process it. You know, I couldn't cry because, you know, I'm the man of the house, so I have to be strong for everybody. And, you know, if everyone else is crying, my mother is like, well, who's going to be strong for her? So I kind of had to hold in the feeling of sadness. And, you know, my sister, she went to college in Florida. And again, my brother was home and I was here. So I was the closest sibling who can understand, you know, opposed to my little brother. But I went to my chemo treatments with my mother, radiation treatments. I was with her when she couldn't hold her food down and things like that anymore. And I remember at the end of so the cancer started to metastasize. And at the end of my sophomore year of college, my sister called me. I remember I was at Associated Grocery Store on, I think it was like 95th in Lexington. And my sister called me hysterical. And she was just like, why didn't you tell me mommy was in hospice? I'm like, she's where? I'm like, I don't even know what hospice is. Like, what is hospice? And she was just like, you know, they take you there to make you comfortable for death. And I was like, okay, so, you know, this is serious. But even at that point, it didn't register to me. And I only, in the time that my mother told me she had cancer, I only cried once. I cried, I was in my college dorm, I was sitting against the wall, and this was the beginning of my sophomore year, and she called me and said that the cancer went to her bones in her spine. And that's when I cried, because my best friend's father had just passed away from cancer in his bones and in his blood. So immediately I'm thinking, oh my God, I don't have much time left. And that was the only time I cried and the only time my mother actually heard me cry. So once I was done finals, I went home. And that was actually the only time my sister and I have ever been home together, because she was in Florida, I was here. So she would stay in Florida and I would go home and, you know, never see her. But that summer we were home together. and my mother was in hospice. So as soon as I got home, I went to go see her. You know, she was fine. She looked fine. You know, she looked different because she lost a lot of weight, and then she had to cut her hair. But she was growing this really pretty bush. Her hair was so curly, it was so soft. I'm like, look at your hair, girl. You know, it was happy to see her in good spirits, and she was in such great spirits. And her birthday was May 15th, so we threw her a party in hospice and invited all of our family and her friends. And there was actually one of her old classmates from kindergarten who showed up, and it was just amazing. The people in hospice said that they had never seen so many people, you know, in that hospice center before. And at the end, my mother, she stood at the head of the table, and you can hear a pin drop because it was so quiet. And she just thanked everybody for coming out, and she was like, you guys can stop crying, stop worrying about me, I am not sick. Like, she stood there and declared, I am not sick, I'm gonna be all right. And that was May 15th. But I knew that she would leave. You know, she got to a point where she couldn't leave the hospice bed because her legs were so swollen with fluid. And then once the cancer went to her brain, she stopped talking. So it went from breast cancer to being in her spine, and then it went to her hip, her liver, and then it went to her brain. So she couldn't talk to us anymore, but we would still go to hospice, and my sister would say, if you can hear me squeeze my hand. So that's how we would communicate with her. And I remember one night we left the hospice, and I was like, I wonder how many days she had left. And lo and behold, the next day she was gone. So her birthday was May 15th, and she passed away on May 26th. And then my junior year of college, so I went back to college literally 4 months after she passed away, and my room number was 626. So it had the 26 in it, even though it wasn't 526. I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. It was an adjustment, but we knew we had to come back to college. There was no taking a break. And her friends and my family couldn't understand, like, wait, what do you mean you're not going to take time off? We're like, no, we have to go back to school. My mother, she required us to have 3 documents: our driver's license, our high school diploma, and our college diploma. She was like, I don't give a shit what y'all do after that, but as long as I have those 3 things, we are good. So I came back to school, and I was going to take some time off, and my college was like, no, you're going to graduate in May of 2012, and I did. And I did. I walked across the stage, I looked up to her, and I was like, thank you. And my life has been a blessing ever since. You know, she is definitely my guardian angel and looking down on me every single day. As I've gotten older and as my life has kind of sort of changed and I started to get a little bit more busy, I just really started to realize that how important family was. And going home now, it brings me back down to earth, and it centers me. You know, I love to be around my family. You know, my grandmother, my brother, all of my aunts and my uncles, they're there. They keep me grounded. So anytime I feel like I'm getting a little bit too big-headed, or just when things are kind of overwhelming, where it's just getting a little out of control, I go home to settle and to be at peace and to get my mind right. And then once I feel like I'm ready to come back, I'm like, okay, Sean, you can go back to New York and you can do this all up again. But Baltimore now, it's like my center. It keeps me very centered, and it keeps me very calm. I want to be a voice to kids, teenagers, adults, to really inspire them and to let them know that through it all, you are still able to be successful and to achieve whatever goal and any goal that you put your mind, your heart, your soul, your energy, your blood, your sweat, your tears to. You know, everything is possible as long as you work for it. But I feel like the world does a disservice to kids in the inner city because we only see them, and I'm saying we because I'm a product of that environment, we only see them on TV. We only see them on magazines. We only see them, you know, on Instagram, but they're never brought to our schools. So we have an awe of these people. So I'm bringing those people to the world, to those kids who want to excel, but they can't and they don't know how, or they're not motivated to escape, you know, inner city life and the poor conditions of growing up in the inner city. So I want to be a voice, and I want to be that motivation. I want people to look at me and say, if Sean can do it, you know, I can definitely do it. And I feel like that's my responsibility.